Thanks, Amanda. And thank you, Dr. Barrett, for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us to discuss the gender gap in STEM. And I'd like to start off, just asking you about this trend we've heard for years now, that in the younger years, so in elementary school or so, we hear that girls do seem to be interested in STEM subjects and, have confidence. And then for some reason around middle school and definitely by high school, that starts to change. And I was wondering if you could talk about, why you think that is and how maybe even girls of color in particular might be especially at risk.
Nadra, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And that is such an important question. At Girls Who Code, we are committed to closing the gender gap in technology. But for us, it's so much more than just teaching girls computer science or addressing issues of equity in the workplace. It's about changing a culture that tells our girls, our young women, our students who identify as non-binary, that they don't belong in tech. And for us, it's very much about really getting through to them that they deserve to have a seat at the table. And, as you think about this work, so much of it is that our girls, even before the age of 10, are internalizing these cultural touchstones around what a computer scientist looks like. And these internalized beliefs stick with them and they resonate, their entire lives. So elementary school, middle school, college, even into the workforce. And you talked about this age, Nadra, in terms of when we see this happen. And the data tell us that somewhere between the ages of 13 and 17, what we call the middle school cliff, we see this drop off. It's when the weight of society's assumptions around identity and intelligence begin to coalesce and chip away at a girl's sense of what's possible. And that leads, frankly, to seeing lower rates of, advanced placement computer science course taking and test taking. And we also see really, abysmal numbers in the college space, with only 19% of women graduating with a degree in the field. And at the core of it is that we always say to Girls Who Code, you can't be what you can't see. And our little girls are inundated with, Neil Armstrong and Albert Einstein and Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, but they don't hear about Katherine Johnson or Mary Jackson or Ada Lovelace or Grace Hopper or Jean Bartik. And so at Girls Who Code, for us, it's about shifting that cultural narrative that says that they don't get a seat at the table. That's why we've done things like create a book series, aimed at babies through middle schoolers. Or if you think about this incredible campaign we launched last year called Make That Change, with a powerful new message for girls and young women, that when you pursue a career in tech, you're not just changing, your community or the world, you can change your own personal professional trajectory and your financial trajectory. Because let's face it, our young women and girls are dynamic, they're passionate, they're creative. They're going to be these change agents. And that's why it's so critical that we really get at culture way beyond just teaching girls computer science.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering that. That was really insightful. And one thing I just want to follow up on, you mentioned women like Katherine Johnson and others. And so I was wondering if you can discuss the film Hidden Figures and what kind of cultural impact, that film made on girls and girls of color in particular.
Yeah, and I am so happy that I don't think anyone has ever asked me that question, so I love it. That when I saw it, even if I think about my 13-year-old daughter and what it meant for her to see these incredibly powerful, Black women on the screen who frankly put, our space program on the map at a time when they couldn't even drink from the communal water fountain. And it has taken, 7 decades essentially for them to get their due, to be recognized. And yes, I'm so elated that we now have a NASA spacecraft that bears the name, the SS Katherine Johnson, and this huge building in DC is dedicated to Mary Jackson. But one of the pitfalls is that they resemble the girls we work with every day. They were right there. We're calling them hidden figures, but they were plotting and calculating and doing the work like we see our Black and brown girls doing every day. And it's so easy to overlook them. But one of the things that's so powerful about that film as well is exactly that first question that you asked me, representation in tech for our girls, young women, non-binary students, to see them is absolutely critical because these media messages mean something. There's so many other examples, Nadja, when you think about the Hunger Games and Brave that both, featured women using bow and arrows. Guess what? There was a 50% increase in the number of girls pursuing archery.
Oh,
So
wow.
as much as you don't think about it, what we do depends a lot on what we see. So we can never minimize that having a film that celebrates and, calls out these accomplishments can have an exponential impact. So thank you so much for asking that question.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering that. And I would love to also hear a little bit about your own experience. Tell me about, what it was like for you growing up, and then how this led you, to make STEM focus of your career.
Oh, thank you for asking that question. I am so proud to be sitting here now, CEO of Girls Who Code, focused on closing the gender gap in tech. But, I'm also, Jamaican American, the proud daughter of immigrants, a Black woman and an educator. And all of those perspectives shape how I approach my work. I stand on the shoulders of generations of inspiration, the women who got me to where I am today, as well as the girls and young women who continue to inspire me to fight for a brighter future. And, my grandmother actually had to drop out of school and work on the family farm in Jamaica after her mother had passed away, helping to raise her 7 younger siblings. And even though her education had been cut short, she understood that it could pry open the doors of opportunity. And that's a notion that she passed on to her children, all the way down to me. And, I also had a mom who really encouraged me to go into spaces, to embrace my own agency and know that I could be the change that I wanted to see. And to your specific question of how did I get here doing this work? I've really devoted my entire career to addressing issues of equity in education, but it was when I had a chance to work at the New York City Department of Education where a lot of this really crystallized for me. I had a chance to work with students who were significantly off track academically with very little chance of graduating on time. Most of them were poor Black and brown kids who looked, just like me when I was growing up. And my job was to help get them back on track with things like transfer schools, GED programs, other programs. But our team also was charged with designing new schools, right? To develop skills or to cultivate, things that employers were looking for. And as it happened, Nadja, one of these schools was going to be a first of its kind high school focused on software engineering. And it was going to be a part of the mayor's plan to make New York City a tech hub. But it was also potentially going to be what we called a quote unquote screen school, which would mean that only certain kids, they would have to test in to get accepted. Mm-hmm. Now, as an educator, I knew that relying solely on test scores was going to put kids of color at a disadvantage. So as hard as it was, I, fought against screening and rallied support to open that school to any kid interested in learning computer science. And, it wasn't easy. There were definitely some thinly veiled conversations about whether or not Black and brown kids could even learn to code. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy to report that today, that school, the Academy for Software Engineering, is real. And for the kids who were there, 95% of them are graduating on time. And, that was one of my proudest accomplishments as an educator, but it was also a lesson in how critical it is that we exist at that intersection of bravery and opportunity, and that we disrupt the status quo anytime we're given that chance. And so that experience was definitely part of what drove me to be CEO of Girls Who Code. And I knew that the gender gap, closing that was possible. Equity in education is possible. And I knew that I had to be a part of that change.
Yeah. No, thanks for, talking about your own experiences. And, since you mentioned your role in the development of this school, I was also wondering how important it is in terms of closing this gender gap in STEM. Is it for students to have math teachers, science teachers, technology teachers, et cetera, who look like them? I'll just share in my own K through 12 experience. I think I had one Black math teacher, and that might have been it for my entire K through 12 experience. One Black woman math teacher.
Yeah, no, and Natra, what you're talking about is at the core of what we're grappling with. Like you're saying that now, right? As a successful, you know, professional. My children are 13 and 15, and neither of them have ever had a Black male teacher, for example. And, certainly that's true in terms of the tech sector. As much as we feel that we've had an outsized impact as an organization, we're still talking about an industry, for example, where only 26% of it is made up of women. And when you talk about Black and Latinx women, it's only 5%. And so much of that is also reflected in terms of what we see within the education sphere. And everything I just said about, it's very hard for girls and young women to see themselves in the sector if they don't have these salient role models. It's one of the reasons as an organization that Girls Who Code has created, for example, Women in Tech Spotlights, featuring women and especially women of color who are making a change in the tech sector, who are technologists in STEM, computer scientists, because it is so critical. And so much of what we do at Girls Who Code is also, in addition to teaching computer science, changing that cultural narrative. Like if you think about last year, this one thing we did that actually gave me credibility with my teenage kids was partnering with Doja Cat on Doja Code, which was, they were like, Doja Cat, Mom. Okay, all of a sudden they cared about what I did, which was phenomenal. But Doja Code was the world's first ever codable music video, and you could go into that. It was for her hit, viral sensation Woman, and you could change the color of her nails, you could change the background, you could have her vanish into thin air. And so much of that work was also making sure that our girls, and especially our Black and brown girls and our students who are the most marginalized and historically underrepresented in tech, that they begin to see that their creativity, their passion, their interests can be brought to this field and that they could see themselves as technologists. So I feel like we have to come at this, Nadra, from a number of perspectives, from the education sphere, from the tech sector itself, because that absolutely has to change. And that's why we have programming, free after school clubs that very much predominantly happen in schools where any teacher can lead. And that means that we're going to have a diverse group of people who are learning alongside our girls as they encounter these Women in Tech Spotlights and they learn to code. We also have summer programming that, again, also exposes these students to all of these female role models. And so we have programming that gets to this community at every stage of the pipeline, because we know how important it is that we really change how diversity looks within the sector.
Yeah, definitely. And I also want to hear a little bit about, students who maybe they're interested in coding or other STEM fields, but they feel at heart more like, they're artists or a humanity person, not tech people. Their way, to merge those interests. I mean, you mentioned the Doja Cat video. Yes. I also know there's schools that aren't just STEM schools, they're STEAM schools. So they are kind of, trying to reach out to that other population.
Absolutely.
So can you talk about that?
No, such a great question. And we find that our alums, for example, girls and young women students who've participated in our programming, they often, let's say they're pursuing computer science or coding directly, or they might be doing things that are tech adjacent. What you're hitting, on is so critical, because it is that creativity that we absolutely have to bring, that artistic sense to the sector, because it is woefully not representing the needs of so many communities. And so I'll point to a couple of examples. While they're not within the art sphere, they're so critically important just for us as humans. We know that there's no opting out of tech anymore, right? Tech intersects every aspect of our lives: voting rights, healthcare, criminal justice system. And, not too long ago, a New Jersey man was wrongfully accused of a crime because facial recognition software, wrongfully identified him as a perpetrator. This person was in jail, but it could have escalated and ended up in something far worse. And you think about another example in the health sector, where the first iteration of Apple's health app had nothing around menstruation or fertility. Had we had women at the table, that would have never happened. So, Nadra, I offer these examples, right? And even if you think about, Doja's incredible video and what it looks like, without our voices, without our influence, we are missing out on, frankly, creating products that actually meet the needs of our community. And I think those are artistic products. I think they're healthcare focused. I think they're safety, their well-being. They're everything that you can imagine. And if that doesn't convince our young people, they need to remember that STEM jobs pay 26% more than other jobs. They are the fastest growing, highest paying sector in our economy. And we can't afford to have our young people left behind. So that's part of what we are so deeply committed to at Girls Who Code, in terms of reminding them that you can be amazing in tech. You can bring everything, all the magic, to this sector. And we need them, frankly, desperately, because of the products we know fall short of what they should be.
Yeah. And now I kind of want you to just maybe brag about yourself a little bit. Girls Who Code, in the sense that I feel like now there is a movement basically to really get girls into STEM subjects, whether it's technology, whether it's math, whether it's science. I know about, at this point, several organizations that are really aimed at getting girls some sort of enrichment that they don't get in their normal school day, to really make them more interested in these subjects and to expose them to more subjects. So with that, I'm wondering if you can discuss how influential you think Girls Who Code has been, and if you think we are kind of in this movement now nationally to really get girls in to pursue these subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. Since our founding in 2012, we've reached 500,000 students with our programming. 115,000 are college and workforce age young women. And you talk about a movement. We're absolutely leading that movement to inspire and educate and equip students who identify as girls or non-binary with these critical computing skills to take on 21st century opportunities. And, for us, by addressing this growing gender gap in tech, we're preparing, as I shared with you, our young people for these thriving and exciting careers of the future. I think that there very much is a movement underfoot to really expand computer science and to ensure, because it is as necessary and as basic, I think, as any other core subject, academic subject, that kids are exposed to currently. And I think that Girls Who Code has been at the forefront of that movement, both in sort of defining the issue and the gap and sort of saying, hey, folks, pay attention to this, but absolutely in terms of the, frankly, hundreds of thousands of girls and young women that we've taught, computer science, but almost equally critically, the fact that the representations we see today, be it on Netflix, other channels, other places where now coding is in the lexicon, we absolutely take credit for that in terms of shifting the narrative and making sure that girls don't think twice when they see someone cast as a coder or recognize, these incredible women making a dent in the field. And yes, we still have a far way to go, but the work underway is so vital. So I'm really proud of that.
Thank you. Yeah. And in closing, you mentioned having teenage children yourself, and you mentioned what the future might possibly look like. And I'm wondering if you can, close discussing that. So by the time, should you become a grandmother at some point, what are you hoping things look like for girls and women in STEM for
Yeah.
future generations?
Yeah, I mean, our vision is very much that our computer science classrooms, resemble the diverse communities that we come from, you know, um, that we build this incredible sisterhood of women in tech that women everywhere can lean on, and that this sisterhood in turn will translate into meaningful change for communities in the entire world. So I anticipate that our girls and young women and students who identify as non-binary are going to be the future leaders in tech, and that they're going to help solve our problems and lead the way around so many issues that we're grappling with today.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you would like our audience to know that I have not brought up about this gender gap in STEM?
Yeah, I mean, I'll make a very blatant plug for our programming. Please visit us at girlswhocode.com. Our programming is aimed at third grade all the way through the workforce. We always say if you have a girl in your life, encourage her to consider pursuing computer science, coding. We have our free after school clubs. Our summer immersion programming is about to kick off. We have college loops on campuses across the country, and we've just, started to engage young women in terms of workforce development. So we know that there are rich opportunities for your community listening to engage in what we're doing and to join our movement.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I really appreciate it.